You would have thought we had some train music to play.
I know, I know. But good walk-on music. So good morning, everybody. My name is Jen Singh. I am the Sustainability Catalyst at ATDC. ATDC is the state of Georgia's technology incubator. We're housed at Georgia Tech, but we are essentially an economic development agency that helps grow Georgia's economy through entrepreneurship. And so how do we do that? Well, we take early stage startups from idea to rapidly scaling organizations through coaching, curriculum, connections, and access to capital. We currently have over 150 startups in our portfolio, and that spans across 9 different verticals. And I have the distinct pleasure of running our sustainability tech program. Right now, we have 25 startups that are building solutions to address things like climate change, sustainability, resilience, a lot of the topics we're going to talk about today. And those companies have created over 114 jobs. So we're achieving our mission there. But one of the reasons why I'm here today is we could not do our program, our sustainability tech program, without the partnership and the support of Norfolk Southern. They have been incredible partners in terms of supporting our startups, and I've gotten to know Josh over the last 2 years of our program. So excited to be here with Josh.
Most of the credit goes to you. You do the heavy lifting.
Thanks. Well, we're here to talk about what Norfolk Southern is doing from a sustainability perspective. It's obviously been a leader in its industry. They first named a chief sustainability officer back in 2007. But things have changed. We're currently in an interesting political and regulatory environment. And so right now, what are some of the biggest challenges influencing your sustainability, your journey, and how are you adapting?
Interesting times. That's one way to put it, right? We've seen a lot of this, political backlash around ESG in particular, DEI, climate change. And I would say as I talk to my other sustainability professionals across, large companies across, the U.S. and the world, I think we're pivoting. We're kind of at an inflection point, and a lot of it's going back to the basics. Why do we do sustainability in the first place? We started our program early on, and it's really about driving efficiency. It's about lowering cost. It's about also engaging with our employees. How do you attract talent? And also it's about brand. How do you create solutions for your customers and be that chosen partner that folks want to partner with you? And then lastly, it's about innovation. It's about how do we drive innovation across the value chain, across systems, which is good for the economy, and it's good for the business, and it's good for the environment in many cases as well. So I think we've seen that pivot. The other pivot, I think, is the messaging. How do we communicate about sustainability? It's hard to go into a red state and talk about ESG, right? But if you break it down to the E, air quality, water efficiency, things of that nature, and you talk about the S, it's safety. It's taking care of your employees. It's taking care of communities. So you've got to kind of break it down to the issues instead of using the acronym. So we've definitely seen that pivot. As far as like commitments, we're not seeing any backing away from that. If you look at, the research being done, whether it's by PwC, Deloitte, Oliver Wyman, the companies they talk to, the CEOs, the boards, sustainability is good for business. It's been around a long time. And we're seeing that, and I would say that even at our company, we've got 3 board members now with sustainability experience, which is unheard of, right? And I think you're starting to see that across more companies as well. So I think it's an inflection time, but it's also an exciting time at the same time.
Yeah, I think what we're seeing at the early stages is we've got massive amounts of startups that are being created. There's still a lot of energy and a lot of ideas. And certainly they're still finding some traction with corporate customers. And that's the lifeblood of helping these companies grow. Where we're seeing a little bit of concern is more on the early stage funding side, so the government funding. DOE, NSF often provide a lot of these really early stage grants to help early stage startups foster their new technologies even before they can go get venture funding. And so without that, I think we need to see more corporate engagement in terms of helping these early stage startups.
Yeah, for sure.
And I know customers are your lifeblood. You certainly have some of the biggest brands and retailers that are your customers across the country. So what are you hearing from your customers right now in terms of sustainability? And how is Norfolk Southern really supporting their decarbonization efforts?
Yeah, so we've got around 4,000 customers. Put that in perspective, and you mentioned the country. It's actually the world. We've got customers all over the world we interact with, and over 10,000 companies now have science-based targets. It's over 40% of the world market cap, so it's a huge number. And as they get more into their emissions, they start to look at their supply chain. And for most companies, that's 90% of their emissions. And contracted transportation could be a significant portion of that. And it's a really tough one to decarbonize, right? It's a really tough one to tackle, and so they've really got to work with their supply chain in order to do that. So one of the ways we help them is by decarbonizing ourselves, so investing in our locomotive fleet. That, not surprisingly, that's over 90% of our Scope 1 and 2 emissions. So any improvements there help them out with their supply chain emissions. The other thing we're doing is data. We're providing them the data they need to make decisions. So, for example, we move a ton of freight, almost 500 miles on a gallon of diesel. But that range is like 150 to over 800, depending on what commodity you use. And so we have the data now to support that, to help logistics manager make better decisions. And that's available in our carbon calculator. It's publicly available on our website. Covers the entire U.S. highway network and U.S. rail system. The other thing we're doing is we're measuring emissions for every shipment we move. So 7 million shipments a year. We're using technology to pull fuel burn data, apply that to every shipment, and produce reports for our customers that show them this is what your emissions were. It has a high degree of accuracy, but we're also showing them other things, not just emissions. How many highway miles are you saving? How much? We're the safest and the most sustainable way to move freight over land. And so it's really important that we give them the other data to help support them as well. And it's also better for our road system as well. So we like to work with our shippers, and we also like to work with our partners such as trucks. Trucks are our partners, maritime, barge, and the ports, such as Georgia ports.
Yeah, collaboration's really key. And then that customer education piece, so giving them the tools, the data, the knowledge. You mentioned you're really focused on your own internal decarbonization, and creating Norfolk Southern's inaugural climate transition plan was a recent major initiative. So tell us a little bit about what are some of the highlights, and how are you progressing on those plans?
Yeah, when we first set our science-based target, we kind of had an idea of how we were going to get there, but there wasn't a specific action plan to do that. And so we were being asked by customers, we were asked by investors, regulators, like, it's great that these companies, you set these targets, but are you actually going to meet that? How are you going to get there to that near-term target, much less a long-term target, right, a net zero? And so we engaged 50 SMEs from across the company and said, what are you working on? What are you working on? And so we went through a series of around 6 workshops, really a lot of engagement. We wanted to understand first, what are the risks and the opportunities as we think about climate change? How's this going to impact our business? Regulatory, physical, all the risks that are out there. And then we said, well, what are we doing? And we taking a look across the board, there were like 60 things that we are already working on to reduce Scope 1 and Scope 2 emissions. And we were able to bucket most of those into 3 different buckets. First, locomotive fuel efficiency. That's huge for us. Not only is it huge on emissions, it's also locomotive diesel is our number 2 expense overall. So we are very incentivized to reduce our fuel burn, right? And so investing in the fleet, investing in good operating practices, and I'm happy to share the last 4 quarters we've set record fuel efficiency. So we've made a lot of progress, in that regards, and going back to 2019, even more than that. So that's the big lever. The next one's low carbon fuels. We've been using biodiesel blends in our locomotives for 10 years now, close to a decade, and we've ramped that up. Over the course of the last 2 years, we've more than doubled that. Put it in perspective, over 20% of our locomotive diesel used last year was some blend of biodiesel. So between a B5 and B15, we can now go up to a B20 blend, and also an R100. So as we get more renewable diesel capacity online, then, at the right price point, then we can pull the trigger there. And the other lever is renewable electricity. It's only about 3% of our total emissions, but it's still an important area for us to focus on as we think about how do we electrify more equipment as well. Our first solar array is actually right here, just west of here at Austell, at our intermodal terminal there. and that's helped support the energy used on site, which is also our first facility to have fully electric cranes, the large intermodal cranes. So we've got 7 of those at that facility. And so that's kind of our, energy and tech kind of intermodal terminal of the future.
Yeah, sustainability is good for business, right? Driving costs down, continuing to progress, become more efficient. And so you mentioned clean fuels, right? That's a major, major portion of your climate transition plan. And it's a really interesting space right now. So what are some of the trends that you're seeing in clean fuels, and what are you most excited about right now?
Yeah, so we've joined the Clean Fuels Alliance, actually all 6 of the Class 1 railroads in the USF. We attended the conference just earlier this year. So it's really all of our pathway of how do we get to what's that drop-in replacement, right, that you can use in existing diesel engines without any retrofits. And so that's really important for us. Bio-based diesel production in the U.S. last year was over 5 billion gallons. So it's a very developed market. To put it in perspective, ethanol is 18 billion. SAF, on the other hand, it was just only over 100 million. So we're very fortunate that we've got a biodiesel pathway, and we're seeing partnerships in that space. So you think of biodiesel and you think of agriculture, right? There's a lot of ag crops, but there's also used cooking oil, animal fats, other things that go into producing that. But the traditional ag folks have partnered with oil companies. So you've got 6 major oil companies now that have over 40 bio-based diesel facilities, either currently in operation in the U.S. or planned over the next few years. So it's a really interesting time as we see that market. I would say what's challenging right now is the federal level. There's not much guidance out there on the renewable fuel standard, but something's coming. The oil companies, ag, they're working with the EPA. They're working with the Trump administration, who's identified biofuels as a legitimate pathway forward. So we're hopeful they'll get that worked out and we'll get back to normal production. But right now, the production in the first quarter of the year has definitely been much lower. So that's definitely been a challenge.
Yeah, we're seeing a lot of early stage innovation in feedstocks. One of our portfolio companies is experimenting with hemp as a feedstock and turning that into renewable fuels. And then I've been talking to a lot of early stage companies that are really interested in waste to energy. So how can you turn different types of waste, whether it's agricultural waste, even human waste, into energy? And I think we'll see a lot more coming out because there's just not enough feedstocks out there right now.
Yeah, and that was actually, something that got my attention. We hosted the Department of Energy, the SAF Summit here, Georgia Tech did just last year, and meeting with the person with the DOE. They have what's called the billion-ton report, and they just updated that last year, and they've identified over 1.4 billion tons of product annually that's currently going to waste that could be used for feedstocks, and that's broken down into a lot of agriculture waste, a lot of forestry-based waste, municipal solid waste, and there's other things out there, kind of feedstocks of the future as well. So that's encouraging because that was kind of the limiting factor we were all thinking about just 2 years ago.
Mm-hmm. And related to biofuels, Norfolk Southern just recently launched its Railgreen program, which is a book and claim system to help its customers decarbonize. So not everybody in the audience probably knows what a book and claim system is. So explain it to us, and how does it help your customers reduce emissions?
I'm still educating our own folks internally. So just met with some of our commercial team earlier this week. So yeah, we started learning about book and claim from our maritime partners. So particularly Hapag-Lloyd, they're our largest maritime partner based out of Germany. Also Maersk based out of Denmark. And it's been around since 2023, so still fairly new. But it's a methodology that was developed by the Smart Freight Center in Amsterdam. And so learning from them and just how can we as NS, so right now we're taking an advantage of biofuels. So we're taking reductions in our greenhouse gas emissions, but we didn't have a verified way to pass that along to our shippers that wanted to participate in that. And so now by going through a verification process with a third-party verifier, we can show those reduced emissions and partner with a registry. And the one we found, we couldn't find one in the U.S. that was really mature in the space, was also located in Amsterdam. And it's 123 Carbon, who we partnered with. They already had 50 people on the platform, and many of them were already partners of ours. shippers of ours as well. So it's going to be mostly consumer-facing brands. Not surprisingly, either it's going to be your Procter & Gamble, your Unilever, it's the folks making products, but it's going to be your big retailers as well, whether it be online retailers or big box stores. Because who's demanding it? It's consumers, right? It's us demanding this. We're willing to pay slightly more. Consumers are. All the surveys you look at, usually it's about 5%. Consumers are willing to pay for greener brands, whether that's sustainable packaging or lower carbon shipping or whatever it is, unless it's food. In food, they're willing to pay 30%. But book and claim is really a way to give a solution to our shippers that want to go that next level. They can reduce emissions 75% already by moving from truck to rail. And they can reduce those remaining emissions in rail through partnering with us, contracting with us for rail green certificates. So it's a really unique program. It is the first rail program in the world. And like I said, we've learned a lot from maritime and a lot from aviation as well. I know it's a huge pathway for aviation.
Yeah, and it's great to see that customers are still willing to pay. There's always talk about the green premium, and do we need that in order for it to get to scale? But it looks like you're already seeing from your customers that they are willing to pay. Is it really just that 5%, or is it more?
I think it's more than that. And I would, we were just with Hapag-Lloyd here just a couple of weeks ago, and they shared they've got over 700 customers already in their Ship Green program. And it's only been around for a couple of years now. And one of the unique things I thought that Mike shared with us is they looked and there has not been a drop-off over the course of the last 6 months. And a lot of these are contracts, annual contracts, multi-year contracts. And so it's interesting that shippers are willing to pay that and participate in the process. And that helps us as transport companies justify going out on the market, purchasing more fuels at a green premium, but also putting in the infrastructure that's needed to support those green fuels as well.
And in addition to clean fuels, I know you've explored different pathways for propulsion. So tell us a little bit more about those initiatives and any challenges along the way.
Do we have an hour? So folks love talking about alternative propulsion, and there's some really exciting things going on in our industry right now. A lot of it's super early stage. Right, but you got to start somewhere. I would say that the thing where we started out there was almost 200 years ago, believe it or not. Our company's been around that long, and our first steam locomotives ran off wood, particularly pine wood, in South Carolina. And it was for 30 years we ran the railroad off of wood, and it's interesting now we're getting back to bio-based materials, for running locomotives. So that's kind of where we started. Back in 2007, we worked with Penn State University, got a grant to do a battery electric locomotive. That was one of the early battery electric locomotives. It had 1,080 12-volt car batteries on it. That's where we were at just in 2007. Think about that. We retrofitted that unit just a few years later, did another retrofit, really learned a lot from that on the R&D side, and also how do you operationalize it. We eventually sold that unit to a company out of California. Last I checked, it was still in operation out of Port of Long Beach. But the first commercial unit there just came online a couple of years ago, and we went out to visit. It's pretty interesting to see a 200-ton locomotive that makes no vibration, no heat, no noise, and the cab's real nice and cold inside. But the challenge that as we look at is the grid. So as we started looking at locations where we could put these in, so they're for yard applications, in just the yard and local moves. The thing we ran into is when you start talking to your utility about how much energy you need, it's a very quick conversation. To put it in perspective, to charge one locomotive, it would be equivalent to 83 Tesla chargers. So imagine a yard location where I've got 4, maybe 6, maybe 8 locomotives that need to be able to charge at one time because it's a 24-hour operation. So that was really kind of a limiting factor for us as we looked at that. Some of the other railroads are doing that. Those units are still on order. They've been back, they're pushed back a little bit. So it'll be interesting to learn. So we are learning from one another, our other industry partners. But then we started looking at the hybrid pathway. The hybrid pathway for us makes a little more sense. We've got a partnership right now with Alstom in New York State to produce units that are fully battery units, but they do have a small Tier 4 diesel engine on board to recharge the batteries as needed. So you kind of get over that. You don't have to charge it all the time, but it is capable of being plugged into the grid. So I think that's a near-term pathway. We were just actually in Pueblo, Colorado at our railroad testing facility just last week. demoing a hybrid unit for line haul applications. So if you think of a locomotive is actually a diesel electric locomotive. Most people don't realize that the traction motors themselves are electric. And so we're just using the diesel engines to create the electricity, but you can change that fuel to other fuel types, right? As different fuels become available. And so they had around a battery system on board. It was around 1 megawatt, hour in capacity, along with the diesel engine. And it was interesting to be able to run a locomotive, a train, at 60 miles an hour with just nothing but battery power. Pretty cool. And then we went into hybrid mode, utilized the diesel engine as well. So we were utilizing diesel plus the batteries. And then the batteries were providing around 20% of the power to run the locomotive. And then when we went into dynamic braking, you could see the energy going back, charging the batteries, and you could see the battery percent going back up. So really unique concept. It's been around in cars for a while, and now we're just getting that to other types of machinery. And so that's really kind of a near-term solution. So that could reduce fuel consumption 20%, to put that in perspective. But there's other things out there the industry is looking at. We've got hydrogen fuel cell as a possibility as well. And there's also tow-behind units that are electric, battery tenders and things of that nature. There's probably 20 different pathways that are being explored right now. But it's exciting because most of it are new to the rail space. These are companies that are coming from outside the rail space to us saying, hey, have you thought about this? Have you thought about that? So I think that's probably the exciting part of my job right now.
Yeah, I love the sharing of ideas from different parts of different modals. So aerospace teaches maritime, teaches rail, and you guys are often collaborating and sharing all those ideas. And I think innovation, we've touched on this a lot, is really key to that sustainability progress. You've talked a lot about fuels, propulsion, but there's many other areas where you can incorporate technology to decarbonize and make the company more sustainable. So what are some of the additional solutions you want to mention? Things that you're looking at, things that you feel are really transformative, but maybe are underfunded or underdeveloped right now?
You made me think of a conversation I had with a student at GreenBiz, just 2 years ago. It was a huge sustainability conference, 2,000 professionals, and he was there. He was just got his MBA, and he was sitting at a table with me for a breakout. And he goes, I've been hearing y'all talk about sustainability for 2 days. He goes, y'all really just have a technology problem. And I said, you are right. I said, that's the smartest thing I've heard in 2 days. He goes, we need to take all these smart tech people that are working on social right now and get them working on sustainability. So there's some cool ideas out there. The one that I would highlight is a company named Remora. We just made an announcement with them this week to develop a mobile carbon capture system for rail. So a unit that would go behind the locomotive, scrub the exhaust, remove 70% of the CO2, 90% of the nitrous oxides, particulate matters as well, and create at the end a purified CO2 product that can be reused, that can go into things like the beverages you have on your table or food products or different manufacturing processes. And what I found is in the Southeast, it's actually, there's CO2's in high demand in the Southeast for manufacturing process. I didn't realize that. Just checked online a second ago, and the price in the U.S. for purified CO2 is $783 a metric ton. So if a locomotive that has 5,000 gallons of diesel, if you burn that, you're going to create around 56 tons. So multiply that out, and it's around $43,000. So it's a revenue-sharing venture that we're partnering with Remora that can solve a lot of problems, right? It's the economics. It's how do you scale it? And actually, this is going to be a pilot project to start with, but they're very aggressive. They've got a goal to get 500 units in service by 2030. How I met Paul, the CEO. Paul was 24 at the time. He's just got his MBA. He had a patent and he had 5 employees, and he wanted to work in the trucking side and Class 8 trucks. And he's actually partnered with a number of our trucking partners to develop a carbon capture system that attaches to the back of the cab of the trucks. And I told Paul, I was like, Paul, when you get ready to scale, come talk to me. I said, we don't have the weight restrictions like trucks do. There's a lot more opportunities there to scale. And so Paul reached out about 8 months ago, and he's like, okay, I'm ready to talk rail cars. He goes, I think we've got it figured out. Well, I didn't even know he was working on it. So he started taking that idea, working with his engineers, and now he's got 50 employees. He's got $117 million in venture capital, and it has just really, really taken off. And it started as a startup, tech company just 4 or 5 years ago is when they started. So it's taking creative ideas like that that we need smart companies that can move fit quickly, right? Corporate America, government, universities. I love my university partners. We can be slow, right, to move and innovate. And so we really need these smaller companies out there to really bring those ideas, be quick to move, but also partner with us, bring us ideas, and let's collaborate. So that's exciting.
Yeah, it is. But I think what's most important is your willingness to work with those early stage companies. Because I know a lot of big organizations always aren't set up to do that, right? Procurement, your procedures, and law. But finding ways and being internal champions to bring those new technologies are really important. And I know you're just kicking off a pilot with one of our companies, and we're excited to see where that goes as well. But I think for those in the room, I think my call to action, many of you are at larger companies and have the opportunity to work with these early stage startups. And that's what we need more of. We need more partners for these early stage startups. So your willingness to test ideas, even if they, don't fully come to fruition, but they can oftentimes evolve, just like Paul did from going from trucks to rail. And I think that's the most important and what we need to see in this industry. So we're at the end of our conversation today. We have a few minutes. Did you want to take a question? Or?
Yeah, no, this has been fun. We do have about 4 minutes left. We got any questions from the audience?
Everyone's shy this morning. Oh, we got one here in the front.
Yeah, so the question came up about hydrogen technology there. We aren't specifically working with anything hydrogen right now. Canadian Pacific Railroad, though, has 3 hydrogen locomotives, 1 in line haul service, 2 in yard applications. And so we're kind of learning from them right now. They developed their own in-house. And so those are applications. I think that the challenge they're facing, that we all face there, is the cost. How do we scale that? How do we get the cost? There's some safety considerations as well, so we have to go through regulatory bodies. So if you think about things like pulling a hydrogen tender behind a locomotive, there's safety concerns there, and so we're a highly regulated industry, and so there's challenges there. Not saying it won't happen. It's happened in Europe. Europe started investing in hydrogen passenger trains back in 2017. They've done some hydrogen freight trains over there as well, but some of that has been recently scaled back, and it was just due to price. They couldn't get the price down to be really competitive. But no, great question. It's still a pathway. Yeah. Hey, Dave.
Intelligence to sustainability
Yeah.
to alternative fuels. Y'all made an amazing
Yeah.
contribution, but how much? How many programs do you have?
So David's a Georgia Tech alum, so he's asking about our partnerships with Georgia Tech. That's part of the reason we moved our headquarters to Atlanta, was taking advantage of that relationship with Georgia Tech. So I think we've probably got at least a dozen programs going on right now. Over 100 of our employees are Georgia Tech alums. And so we've got a lot of really, really cool things we're working on with Georgia Tech. I can't disclose any monetary figures, but I will say probably the neatest idea that's come out here recently is our train inspection portals. And so that was actually something we started working on in 2019. That was sped up due to the event that happened over 2 years ago now. And so we've got 7 of those systems in place, and it's a camera system. Think of a shed, a tunnel that the train passes through at 60 miles an hour. You capture 1,000 images of every rail car from 360, all the way around the rail car using AI, machine learning. We started with 12 algorithms. I think we're up to over 60 algorithms now. And so it's amazing the defects that it can find, the systems can, and also not just find things, but it can prioritize them. And so some recent finds we had were broken wheel sets, which lead to derailments. And so those definitely prevented a derailment or two, just having those fines. So it's working with innovative folks like, GTRI and other universities that we work with and partnerships. So it's been a great partnership, and it's going to be a long one to last. Thanks for the question.
And also your partnership with ATDC. Yes. So that's all we have for today. Thank you, Josh. Thank you for sharing your insights, and thanks for being a great partner.
Yeah, no, appreciate it. Thank you.